This episode of The Important Part was recorded on February 24th, 2025. This podcast is sponsored by SoFi to help you get your money right and is for informational purposes only. Nothing in this program is a recommendation from SoFi to you or any listener. You should not rely on this program for any financial advice or legal or tax advice. The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the institutional views of SoFi or its affiliates.
Before we start this episode, quick announcement. I want to let you all know that we're going to be taking a few months off, mostly because I am going on maternity leave. I am becoming a mama. So we're going to take a few months off. We're going to go back to the drawing board, figure out how to make this even better for you when I return. In the meantime, we're going to be re-releasing some of our favorite episodes, and we'll be back later this year.
This is The Important Part. I'm Liz Thomas, head of investment strategy at SoFi. Today, we're going to do something a little bit different. It's my turn to be on the other side of the mic. And here to interview me and lead that conversation is Brian Walsh, also known as Dr. Money, head of advice and planning at SoFi. So I'm going to turn it over to him and say, take it away, Brian.
Thanks, Liz. I'm really excited to kind of dive into this, not only to hear about your career background, but also, more about how you communicate with different audiences. So in Liz's role, she communicates insights on the economy and the market to really empower people to make more informed and meaningful decisions in their financial lives. Before her time at SoFi, Liz spent time as the director of market strategy at BNY Mellon Investment Management. She also spent time on the analyst side working for Baird as well as BMO Global Asset Management. In addition to being a CFA, she received her BBA in finance and marketing from University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, as well as her MBA from Marquette University. Well, Liz, welcome to The Important Part.
Thank you. Welcome to my own podcast.
Yeah, kind of familiar, huh? Okay.
It's so funny. It's funny to be on this side of the mic.
We'll get started kind of from a background, all the way back.
Way back. Okay.
Yeah, tell it. What was it like growing up in Wisconsin?
Oh, gosh. What was it? I mean, that we could do a whole podcast just on that. So growing up in Wisconsin, I came from a very big family. My mom is one of 10 kids. And a lot of my family was in northern Wisconsin for much of my life. So there was a lot of farmland, a lot of really simple life things. And that's one of the beauties of the Midwest, I think, especially growing up in the Midwest. I mean, you still live in the Midwest.
Oh, yeah.
But it's Michigan. You're in the Eastern time zone. So I'm not sure that counts. Anyway, growing up in the Midwest, I think you end up with a value system that is very well ingrained, and that was part of the growing up in Wisconsin piece of it. But there's a simpleness to life there, and not being on the coasts. There are some limitations to it. You don't have as much exposure, but there's a good simpleness to it, and I think it's a wonderful place to establish your value system and have about as simple of a childhood as you can.
This is like a commercial then for the Midwest. This
move
is perfect.
to the Dairyland state.
So talking about finances, that's what this show's about. But what money lessons or habits or values did you learn growing up that way that still stick with you?
I said I am from a big family. My mom's one of 10. I'm the oldest of 15 grandkids. It's just there's a lot of people, right? There were 50 people at Christmas every year. Not a one was in finance. Not a one. So I am the first person in that entire family to go into this industry. And I say that because there's a lot of times, people couldn't figure out why I was even interested in it. But also, I'm not a situation where it was I had an uncle who had a company and got me into the biz, and none of that. I chose it uniquely for myself. But the lessons that I learned absolutely from mom. And my mom, she was a single mom until I was 9. So there was definitely a survival aspect to that. She had me when she was in college. And when I was a baby, until I was about 18 months or 2 years old, we were on welfare and food stamps. And she was a struggling college student. And she was trying to finish her degree. And then she was working nights and trying to get childcare for a baby all by herself, right? So there was definitely a survival aspect that I think breeds prioritization. And You have to go through, what are the things that we need to have money for? What are the things that are really important? And she had to make some choices when I was young because we were living in not the greatest part of town. So she didn't want to send me to a public school, but we didn't have a lot of money.
Yeah.
But she chose that it was important to send me to a private school in that area because she wanted there to be a different type of education that was happening. So then she had to make sacrifices in other ways. So there's some of the money lessons that I learned early were prioritization and sacrifice. And there was enough money for survival, but there wasn't much extra money to do other things. And then I think the other thing that I learned, and that my sister, she's 13 years younger than me, that she later learned from mom, was that you need to stand on your own 2 feet and you need to make your own money as a woman in whatever industry. It doesn't matter. You have to be independent. You can build that safety and independence for yourself, and you will pursue your education in order to do so.
It's interesting, like you said, no one was in finance in your family, but like prioritization and sacrifice, I can't think of two better values to instill that then lead to, solid financial decision making down the road. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
So how'd you end up majoring in finance in college if
no
people
background? Ask me that all the time. And I'm like, I wish I had some kind of profound, I woke up this one day and somebody inspired me. I mean, I always liked math. I was good at math and I wanted to go into business, and they were the perfect combination of those two. So I like numbers and I like business, and it was going to either be finance or accounting, and I found accounting pretty boring. Anybody who listened to our tax episode will find out that I shouldn't be an accountant anyway. But so I chose wisely.
Yeah.
But finance was the way to go for me, at least in that moment. I double majored in marketing because I was interested in business and branding and advertising, and I minored in Spanish.
Oh, wow.
Because I wanted something that was different from business, which that was a success because you end up in classes with kids who are just so different and you get a different viewpoint. So the finance piece of it, interestingly, I thought I wanted to be in corporate finance, meaning I thought that my goal would be to be a CFO someday. And the reason I liked corporate finance was because the numbers always added up. There was always an answer. There was always a one side of the equation and then an equal sign, and that was the other side of the equation. And it was very black and white, and it was solvable. At least that's what I thought in my head. Whereas finance and investing, not always solvable. And there's a lot of gray area, and that was uncomfortable for me. And I didn't actually get into the investing part until later in my career.
So what did you start out doing career-wise after college?
I had 3 job offers out of college. One of them, and I'm saying these numbers so that people keep things in perspective. The lowest offer I had was for $26,000 a year. The middle offer I had was for $30,000 a year. And the highest one was for $34,000 a year. They were literally exactly spread out on that spectrum. The highest one, for some reason, I just couldn't get excited about the company. The stock had gone down. And it turned out that company actually went bankrupt about 6 months later. So thank goodness I didn't go there. I chose the middle one, which was the $30,000 a year salary. And that seemed like that could have been $3 million to me at the time because I was making nothing before that. So $30,000 a year. It was a regional bank, and I was in the trust department of that regional bank. And I was what was called an ACM trader. ACM stood for Automated Cash Management. So I traded money market funds that were what were sweep accounts, and sweep accounts still exist. So a sweep account is something where in an investment account, let's say you buy a stock, your cash position goes down by whatever that purchase was. The account automatically sweeps money either into or out of a money market fund in order to cover that purchase. So it goes in both directions. So I was the one behind the buttons that found out what the numbers were that needed to be swept twice a day into or out of these funds. This required very little thought on my part because the computer told me what to trade. But what it did was establish the underbelly for me of how an investment account works. I got to learn from the operations side of it.
Yeah.
What were these different types of accounts? Why is the money moving that way? What are these funds that are investing that we're investing in or taking money out of for all of these clients? Who are these clients? What, all of the different things. So I learned some of the interworkings of a trust department or an investment company, and I learned about money market funds because we actually ran the money market funds that clients were into and out of. So it was honestly pretty fascinating at the time. So I did that for a few years and learned quite a bit about trusts and about investments, at least as much as I could through that lens. Moved around a little bit in the operations department. All in, I think I was in operations for about 5 years in the beginning.
Interesting. I think on the surface, it could sound, okay, boring, just like one side.
And it was. It was.
But the idea, though, like to have the curiosity to say, like, okay, how did these things actually work?
Right.
Which, I mean, I'm assuming that we'll get to it later, but that curiosity and that interest to learn more, I'm assuming led to other aspects of your career down the road.
You could just choose to sit there and be a button pusher, but I would dig deeper and say, like, what is this account? What is happening here? What triggered that trade, right? And that's the digging and the curiosity.
In other interviews that you've done, you talked about how there were 2 pivotal moments when it comes to your career.
Okay, yeah.
What are those pivotal moments, and why were they so pivotal?
The pivotal moments that I think of are times when I had to say yes to something in order for that pivot to occur. It was a risk that I had to take, and it changed the trajectory of my career, of my life, frankly. So the first one, and these both are tied to mentors or one particular opportunity that came up because of a mentor who later became a mentor. The first one, I was in that operations job, that first job out of college, and I had gotten promoted and moved around a little bit. They had put me on a path of very prescriptive promotions, which is kind of how those jobs work.
Yeah.
If you complete these few steps, you will get promoted to the next level, blah, 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 blah. So you had this very well-orchestrated, telegraphed plan. And that sort of thing is kind of attractive to me. I like a plan. I like to know what's coming, right? I don't like uncertainty. I ended up in the wrong field, if that's the case. But at the time, I was young and I liked the idea of certainty, but I was itching for something more. And this is still at a time when I thought that I wanted to be in corporate finance. So I liked the company I worked for. I started to interview at some other jobs, and I was interviewing in the corporate finance department. I think I interviewed for 2 jobs. I didn't get either of them. And I was downtrodden about it. And like, okay, well, maybe I need to just wait a little bit longer. And the woman that I had been working with in HR came to me and said, I have an idea. I've got this other thing that I'm trying to fill. It's an analyst position for the chief market strategist in the investment side of the business. And he's interviewed like 100 people. He doesn't like any of them. I don't even know what he's looking for anymore. Why don't you just give it a shot? And I looked at the job description and thought, this is way over my skis. I am way underqualified. I'm too young for this. I don't have the chops. Why would he even be interested in hiring me? So I resisted, and she kind of kept pushing, like, just give it a shot, right? Yeah. You never know. So I said, fine, send him my resume, right, whatever. We can have an interview. So we have an interview, and I had to submit a writing sample. And again, I'm way over my skis. I had to submit a writing sample, and it turned out, for whatever reason, he liked me. And he gave me a chance. I was by far the greenest one that he interviewed. I think in that moment, he wanted somebody to mentor. He wanted somebody that was young enough and didn't have any what he would call bad habits. Yeah. I didn't have any habits.
So no bad habits.
No bad habits. He could build them all. And so we ended up hitting it off, and it was just the chemistry and the ability to work together and having similar even value systems. And I think he wanted to teach me. He was in the twilight of his career at the time, and I was just getting started. And he convinced me to register for the CFA program. That sent me on a totally different trajectory. It sent me away from corporate finance. He then became the model of my dream job. He was the chief strategist. He was the one that was communicating with clients. He was writing the market outlooks. He was the one going on TV. And I thought his job was so cool. And I was like, someday, I hope a company will give me a job like that. Right. So then that became the pipe dream. And that was the first pivotal moment. But what I said earlier, it required me to say yes to something that, number one, I didn't think I could do. Number two, I didn't even know if I'd be interested in. And number three, I couldn't even picture what that looked like. I didn't know what I even needed skills-wise in order to accomplish it. So that was the first one.
Yeah.
The second one, fast forward a couple jobs. I had that job, and then I went to Baird for about 4 years. And I was an analyst at Baird for 4 years. This one was even bigger than that in the sense of even my personal life got upended by it. I was still living in Wisconsin, working at Baird. I was married, had gotten married about 3 or 4 years earlier than that, and was on this, again, path that I thought was very well orchestrated. And I thought I had all of my plans in place, but there was just something that didn't sit right, and none of it felt right. So completely, I say this all the time, I basically rolled a grenade down the hallway of my life and flipped my personal life upside down, left my marriage. We sold the house. I moved into first my parents' basement with my cat, and then got a 1-bedroom apartment, felt like I had gone backwards in life.
Yeah.
Had no plan really, but knew that I needed to at least give myself the opportunity to have a different plan. And I wanted to move to either New York or San Francisco. And I just told myself wherever the opportunity came up first, that's where I would go. And then it was like, so how do I find this opportunity? Who's going to give me this opportunity? So I had to start doing uncomfortable things like putting the word out there, asking people for an opportunity, saying, I don't want to live in Wisconsin anymore. I want more. I want to move. I want something else. I like communicating, right? And none of this was fully baked. So I was just sort of like spitballing at people. And I said the right thing to the right person at the right time. And that person happened to be building an investment strategy team at the Bank of New York. And he said, you know what? I'm building a team. Now I'm fast forwarding a lot. This happened over the course of about 6 months or so. I'm building a team. Do you want to be my first external strategist? You got to move to Manhattan. And I was like, yeah,
Perfect.
sure. Let's do that. So they moved me from Milwaukee to Manhattan. I had been here a couple times for work, but I didn't know I had no friends. I didn't have any family. I had like nothing. Even that guy that hired me lived in Boston. So I got here, everything was new. And I didn't know if I was going to be good at the job. I didn't really understand entirely what the job entailed even, but I had given myself a chance to try. And I remember getting here and thinking, I hope this works out. I hope this works out. And then a few months in being like, this has to work out. I just left my entire life behind. Yep. I have to make sure this works out. So that was May of 2015. And I'm still here.
Turned out to be good.
Those are the turning points.
I couldn't even imagine the transition because I live in rural Michigan. Yeah. And I'll come to like New York or San Fran for a day or two. And I'm like, oh man. I'm only here for a day or two. I'm like, this isn't home anymore. So it's like actually picking up and moving, that's a huge transition.
Yeah, it is a big transition. And it was, but I was so enamored with it. And I was so just enchanted with the city. I felt like I was on vacation for the first 6 months. And I just kept exploring. And I was so happy to have this new path and this new opportunity and just this new chance at building a life that now I had the chance to construct it the way that I really, really wanted to, right? And it was so exciting. It was stressful, don't get me wrong. And the move happened, it happened all so quickly. I mean, in less than a year, all of those things happened, right? A divorce, quitting a job, starting a new job, moving to Manhattan. I took level 3 of the CFA in the same 7-day period that I moved here. And it started the new job and everything. So it was not without stress and it was not without fear and like crippling anxiety some days. But it's still, the excitement of it kept me going.
Well, and plus you had to leave Solomons, so you couldn't have Solomons burgers anymore. Like, I mean, all those other things aside, I mean.
Yeah, so Solomons, for anybody out there that doesn't know, burger joint, big Marquette burger joint. There's two locations, but it's so good. Yes. And they serve a Bloody Mary with a burger on top.
I mean, it's
like this.
It's like this.
It's a meal. Yeah. Yeah. Delicious. Absolutely delicious. I also miss a restaurant called Real Chili.
So I guess like now you're an investment strategist. Mm-hmm. I mean, I've been working with you for a while, so I know, but like, what's an investment strategist? What do you do?
Well, I mean, it can mean a lot of different things in different firms. Investment strategist and market strategist sometimes are used somewhat interchangeably. So in the role that I'm in at SoFi, it's mostly external facing. So the idea of communicating basically to the audience, whoever that audience may be, given the medium or what I'm doing that day, capital markets views and economic views into, okay, what's an actionable way to think about that in a portfolio? Sometimes it's about educating. Basically, the mission statement of my team is reach, teach, empower. So sometimes it's about reaching as many people as I can. Sometimes it's about educating as many people as I can about how does this data point, how does this part of the economy impact or influence what's happening in the stock market. Sometimes it's about making sure that people feel comfortable taking hold of their own financial future with that education, and how do we work that into an investment portfolio. So a lot of it is communicating those viewpoints, taking the economic and capital markets views to an audience. Many investment strategists have multiple prongs to their job, as do I. The communication of those viewpoints begins with, number one, formulating the viewpoints. So begins with the research, begins with the decisions. And then it's about figuring out how to connect with an audience so that it lands. And that's a really big piece of it, because you can get a document, a 20-page document that's way too far in the weeds. Nobody's really digesting that the way that you want them to, depending on who the audience is. So it's about getting that communication out in the right form. The other prongs that can exist and do in my job as well is a lot of times you sit on different committees or you're responsible for making investment decisions for the company. So for example, we work together on our robo platform. That's one of the other prongs of my job. I also sit on our 401k committee. So I work with our providers on the investment selections that we offer our employees in our 401k plan. So there's usually some sort of investment process involved as well. And then there can be client management in it. So I, for example, at SoFi do member events and interact with our members that way and talk about what they're doing in their portfolios. They have chances to ask questions. Some people may, for example, in my last job, I traveled a lot and I met with clients on the road. A lot of companies have that as a prong, but there are a lot of different aspects to it. And then the communication piece of it, whether you're traveling to meet clients or you're sitting on a committee or you're doing it as the bigger part of just communicating capital markets information, you have to be able to communicate in different ways. So I have to be able to do it verbally. There's usually some kind of writing that happens. I'm writing on a weekly basis, definitely on a semi-annual basis for outlooks. And then we also have pieces that go out on a monthly basis. There's presentation skills that have to occur, right? There's all these different mediums, and then there's podcasting. There's a lot of tentacles to the octopus of being a strategist.
What I've always found fascinating, and I think I told you this the first time I met you years ago, I was like, how you're able to communicate really complex ideas in a simple manner. Like even on Twitter, I'm not just saying that, you're one of my favorite people to follow on Twitter because I'm like, okay, I get good news.
You have a biased opinion.
It might be biased. Okay, you're from Wisconsin, so I'm like, okay, Midwest. Right. But I'm like, complicated ideas in, 100, but I'm bad at Twitter. How many characters?
280.
280, yeah. I know. You made fun of me then.
But
not knowing Twitter.
But I have to give a lot of credit, too, to Mario, my analyst, because he does a lot of this stuff, too. And working with him and figuring out, and we're in a different generation, right? We're different generations. So he's in a younger generation than me. Figuring out how do we hit the audience in the way that they want to get it, and working together on, it always helps to have two sets of eyes. Sometimes he writes something that's too complicated and I'll say, we gotta simplify that a little bit more. Sometimes I do it. And sometimes, I'm not getting the point across. And one of the things that I tell this to the people that I mentor too, and I tell it to him, I firmly believe if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it yourself. So if you find yourself in a place where you're rambling on about some concept or you can't figure out how to say this, it doesn't mean that you should say more. It means that you should actually go back, do some more research, do some more studying, figure out the concept better yourself, because you will be able to explain it much more simply. And you do have to put it into regular English, because otherwise people just won't get it, right? Even sometimes people in the industry won't get it. So you have to be able to make that transition from really complex into, okay, here's the straight talk.
Now you mentioned when you're mentoring people earlier, you mentioned being mentored. If you're thinking about, talking to someone who, is looking for career advice.
Yeah.
Like what are the pieces of career advice where you're like, okay, please, please, please do this?
Well, number one, screw up early. It's totally okay to screw up. I really mean that. And I say that in the sense of, I think everybody has comfort zones. And especially when you're early in your career, you want to stick in a comfort zone because it seems easier, it seems safer. And a lot of times, let's say in your 20s, you start out, you get your first job, and then your resume says what you did in that job. And then you convince yourself that you should only apply for jobs where that makes sense as a background. And then you stay in that lane and you never exit that lane. That's the definition of staying comfortable and not screwing up.
Yeah.
What I really want people to do is try a few different things. Go interview for that job that you don't think you can get. Go interview for that job that you're like, I don't even know if I can do that. Maybe you can't. You're going to find out, right? But it's okay to find that out at 26 because then you'll have a better base of what am I good at? What really lights me on fire? So first and foremost, screw up early. Secondly, and this kind of comes with the screwing up early, find your edge. And what I mean by that, it's not, I don't mean it in a cliche like, what's your X factor? It's more about what sets you apart from your peer group. And that's going to be different for everybody. Sometimes that's the fact that you're more interested in a particular topic than most of your peers. So you know that you're going to work harder at it because it's fascinating to you. For me, for example, what it was I spent a lot of time as an analyst in my career, but I liked to talk a lot more than anybody else on any of these analyst teams. And I would sit at my desk. I remember at Baird, I would sit at my desk and like pray for the phone to ring because I just wanted to talk to somebody about what I had just written. And I loved it, right? And I loved going to visit the branches of our financial advisors. And I remember my boss telling me, because I said, please let me go do this. I want to go like try to raise assets in these funds and I want to go talk to the advisors. And he was like, well, sure, you can go, but you're still an analyst at the end of the day. I can't pay you to be a salesperson. I can't pay you to do what you're, if you're going to have fun doing that, by all means, go on with your bad self. But your job is still to be an analyst. And that was sort of the point where I realized, okay, I'm different. I want to do different stuff than the other people on my team. How do I meld what then is my edge with this industry, right? So find your edge, find what sets you apart. And then the last part of it is don't make plans, right? I've already talked about this a little bit. You're told to make a 5-year plan. You're told to make a 10-year plan. The first thing that I say to somebody when I start mentoring them, please don't make a 10-year plan. And maybe not even a 5-year plan because you put the blinders on and then you've decided, especially when you're young, you've decided this is where I'm going. And sometimes the most beautiful opportunities are the things that are not on that path. And you have to keep yourself open to hearing those opportunities.
You telling a brief like overview of your background, like as you're going through each one of those pieces, like you pick through and you say, okay, she actually lived this and she went through it. So there's authenticity to it. So yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So I guess, how did you end up at SoFi? We're all thankful, by the way.
Yeah. I resisted it for a while and I was comfortable. So it's funny. I violated my own rule. But it was late COVID times. So this was late 2020. I had been a strategist at the Bank of New York for about 5.5 years at that point, but the traveling days were over because of COVID. So the job was changing. And I had been a strategist on a team. And at the time I reported to the chief economist at the firm. And I was having fun. I was, it was a good job and I enjoyed it. And I had been there long enough. I knew everybody and I felt valued at the company. I had a really good experience there. So I wasn't looking and I wasn't trying to leave. And SoFi was building its investment business and building its profile and brand as an identity outside of lending. And part of that process was to get into different arenas and start to get recognized as a company that had an investment platform, a company that was going to have a banking platform, right? There were all these different things that we wanted to do. And we have accomplished so many things in the time that I've been here. It's been almost 4 years. By the time this episode is out, it'll probably be 4 years exactly. It's changed dramatically, right? Yes. And it's been so fun to watch, especially because when I came on board, it was like, here's where we want to go. And now I'm here 4 years later and I'm like, oh my God, we did it. Like we went there. And it's really cool. They wanted me to come, SoFi wanted me to come and build an investment strategy function. It didn't exist at all. So it was from the ground up for the investment platform that was small at the time, was sort of, coming into its own. And I was going to be the only one. It was just like, you come forth and build said thing, right? And I was terrified. I thought, oh my gosh, I have to leave this like comfortable old bank. And one of my old bosses, if she ever hears this, she's going to laugh hysterically at this story. I have to leave this old comfortable bank and go to like a risky, in my head, this is what I was thinking, a risky tech company. And I don't understand the language that they speak. And it's such a, isn't it a student loan company? And even I was victim to not understanding the branding. But I did it. I actually had a mentor, and this is where mentors come in really handy. I had a mentor say to me, you don't have any kids, you're not married, you can take this risk. And this was somebody at the time who was like, he's like, I have 5 kids. My wife doesn't work. I can't take a risk like that. But that sounds really cool. You should do that. So I did it. And I was terrified at first because it was like, I have to build this whole thing from the ground up. And I've only ever really worked on teams of strategists where everybody had input and everybody had ownership of their little piece of it. I never had to own the whole thing from start to finish. But at the same time, it was so exhilarating and I could put my stamp on it. So I took the risk. This is another pivotal moment in my career. I took the risk. I really loved meeting Anthony and I love working for him still. And he gave me that flexibility and that freedom to, like, this is the framework of what I want to build, but you do you go do that. And it's been absolutely amazing.
I was shocked when you said you were terrified because I'm like, I remember when you joined and I'm like, I would not have picked up on that at all.
Yeah.
So great job masking it. 100%.
Thank you. I masked it with excitement. Yeah.
Okay, so career in finance, leading investment strategy, basically building it from nothing at SoFi. But I mean, at the end of the day, like the financial and investment industry is largely, a male-dominated industry. Like, how has that been, being a female, having an impact in that type of industry?
Yeah, first of all, the industry has come a long way, even since I've been in it. I'm dating myself, but I'm in my 21st year now in this industry. So even in the last 10 to 15 years, the industry's come a long way, and I think we have to give it credit for that. There are a lot more females in leadership roles than there were when I was younger, when I was a really young professional in this industry, and I'm very proud that that is the case. And even when I interviewed at SoFi, I think I interviewed with, I don't know, probably 10, I met 10 people, and 8 of them were women. So that was a differentiator just in and of itself. So we've made a lot of progress. I've had a very positive experience in this industry as a female, but there were some hurdles that I needed to get over. Most of them were internal. Most of them were in my own head. And one of them was, if you're given a seat at the table, you have to have the courage to use it. And there's a lot of times that you end up talking yourself out of using it, or maybe you stay quiet when you shouldn't stay quiet. And part of that, for me, at least early on, and again, a mentor helped me get over this. I was very aware, especially when I became a strategist and I was more externally facing. So I was giving presentations at conferences where I'm on a stage as the keynote in front of a room of 250 men, thinking, first of all, I'm very aware of my age in this scenario because I was in my mid-30s at the time, and I'm very aware of my gender. And that can breed a lot of insecurity. And you tell yourself, oh my gosh, I'm different. And they're judging me. And the reality is most of that ends up in your head more than it really is what the audience is thinking. A mentor got me over that by basically saying, sure, maybe in the beginning, people are noticing what you're noticing. But if your material is solid, if your delivery is solid, and your confidence is solid, it goes away. And after the first few minutes of that presentation, they're not thinking about that anymore. Now they're paying attention to what you're saying. They're paying attention to what's on your slides. They're paying attention to your story, your message, the takeaways. And it was just this aha moment of, okay, so what if I use it, instead of thinking of it as a limitation, think of it as an advantage because I am different, right? I'm not looking like somebody else in this room, just the 251st person in this room who looks exactly the same. So just shifting my own perspective helped. And then, obviously you've heard this thread throughout the entire interview. Mentors have been a huge part of that. And of all of the mentors, the most influential mentors that I've had, there have only been a couple women. Many of them have been men. Many of them have been, all of them were older than me. The experience that I've had in the industry is that it's really quite supportive, no matter who you are, if you find the right people to surround yourself with.
Shifting gears, talking about more on the investment strategy side of things. So we talked a little bit about, what an investment strategist does. Starting at the high level, what is your financial information diet look like? Like, how do you come up with all of the ideas and views that you do?
It's a good question. And I wish I had a very, sort of recipe answer to it, but I don't. There's a number of things. I'm constantly reading, and we are constantly reading. Mario and I are constantly reading. So there's an aspect of making sure that you're up to date on everything that's going on, which is a challenge in and of itself. So there's just news sources, right? And reliable news sources, and that constant trickle of information that's going on. And then there's part of it, for me at least, is being forced to write myself. Because that's how I can crystallize a thought. So if I can pick a topic, for example, last week I wrote about international investing. I can pick the topic, and as we start going through that topic, well, what do we really want to talk about? What are the main tenets of this particular topic? Once you get the data down, and then you start writing about it, your thought process kind of comes out on its own, and you realize what you really think about it. Some of it is gut instinct. Some of it is, I feel like there's a good opportunity in this. And you start at that point, and then I might go to Mario and say, does the data support it, right? I think that this looks like a good opportunity. Does the data support it? I suspect that the data says this, but let's check it out. And there are plenty of times that he comes back to me and is like, nope. It sure doesn't. Not yet. Let's check again in a few months, right? And that's totally fine. But you have to be able to support it with the data. A lot of the reading and the research is sometimes trying to seek out conflicting information. So I might have a stance. I might be really bullish on China, which right now I happen to be bullish on China. I might search out somebody who isn't, because then that'll tell me what I'm missing.
Yeah.
And I do sometimes sit down and make bull and bear cases, and I'll make a bulleted list. What's the bull case? What's the bear case for this particular investment? Whichever one is longer is the one that wins. And sometimes that's not what I thought was going to happen, but you have to stay intellectually honest with yourself too.
So it's interesting. It's not like, okay, I consume all of this data and then I process it, and then it's kind of like it's an ongoing process where you start with the end, and it forces you to kind of crystallize that. Like you said earlier, if you can't explain something succinctly, then you don't understand it. So it's kind of like that forcing mechanism.
Well, yes. And sometimes you end up running out of bullet points on your bull case, or, they dwindle as time goes on. And as you're getting more information in, it's like, okay, well, you know what? That's not really true anymore. Yeah. Or maybe you're running out of bullets on your bear case. You know what? That's not really true anymore. I thought it was going to happen differently. Or I thought that this particular force was going to have a different effect on the market. Market actually loved it. I thought the market was going to hate it, right? So you do have to be constantly thinking about that and constantly adjusting and fighting with yourself about what your own viewpoints are, and allowing yourself to be flexible. The biggest challenge, I think, in being a strategist is that you have to have all of that information, but you still have to have an opinion. And at the end of the day, people like me are a hired opinion. So if I'm just regurgitating, well, here's the data, here's what happened, I'm not sharing an opinion. I have to be able to say, here's the data, here's what happened, and here's what I think you can do with it. I might be wrong. Yeah. And people will remind me that I was wrong for the next 2 years, right? But you still have to be able to give that solid opinion.
So you meant like the reminding part. How do you deal with that in your process? I mean, does that just make you work harder and think through it? Does it cause anxiety, stress? Like, how do you balance that?
Yes, all of it. Yes, it causes anxiety and stress. I don't like being wrong. Nobody does. And especially if I know that there are people, there's a tremendous sense of responsibility if I know that there are people that are taking my advice and actually implementing it in their portfolio, and if I was wrong, that's a terrible feeling. Nobody likes that. So it forces you to go back and say, what did I miss? Why was I wrong about this? But you also have to balance that with, I can't just flip-flop, right? I can't say, okay, I'm bullish on China in 2025. If I'm wrong by February 15th, I can't just change my mind unless something has really changed in the process. And that's why it's important to lay out, here's the thesis on this view. Has the thesis been busted? Or is the market just moving short term one way or another? And you have to stick to that. And the investors that I respect the most are the ones that stick to that, even in the face of adversity. Of course, you can get to a point where you've dug your heels in and now you just refuse to give up on it. But you still have to stick to your knitting and stick to your thesis until the thesis has been proven wrong.
And as you're going through that, it just makes me think of like hindsight bias, where it's like not necessarily the outcome, but like, okay, was the process in place and how can you improve that process?
Right.
Which therefore influence the future. So that's interesting.
Yeah.
Market volatility. That's something that, I don't know if anyone likes volatility.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Some people like crises.
Yeah, that's true. Let's say most people don't like market volatility.
Yeah.
But especially for you, like with what you do, how do you keep a level head and ultimately deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, I don't all the time, right? It's hard, but it's par for the course. It's part of the job, and honestly, a lot of times it makes me more nervous when there isn't volatility because that feels abnormal. That doesn't feel right. That feels like we're going up just unabated, and everything is way too calm, and or it's like we know that there's a lot of uncertainty out there. Why is the market completely ignoring everything that's happening? So that makes me more nervous than the volatility itself. Volatility is usually pretty short-lived. Even the strongest bouts of it, if you look back over history, you see these big downdrafts in the market and it's so dramatic. I mean, the COVID drawdown lasted all of 2.5 weeks and then it was over, right? So that's what we call them, spikes in volatility. They are just that. They are spikes in volatility and they tend to come down pretty quickly. Now, sometimes you have more protracted, such as the financial crisis, more protracted volatility periods where that started really in the fall of 2007 and didn't end until spring of 2009. That felt like a very, very long time, and it was a very long time. But then we had a 15-year period afterwards that was like pretty chill, right? So it does happen in concentrated pieces, and I think that's important to keep in mind. Right now, what we're dealing with is that we just came off of 2 years of 20+% returns in the S&P. So people are not used to volatility. And the biggest drawdown that we've had was, at least last year, I think it was 8%. That is not normal. No. And it's about constantly reminding yourself that that is not normal. So how do you get through those periods? Because it is bound to happen again, right? It is bound to happen again where we have a normal drawdown, which is about 13.5, 14% on an annual basis. That is bound to happen again. It is bound to happen again that we will have another bear market in our lifetimes. Where you as an investor have to make sure you're setting yourself up for success is that when you're coming off of those really successful periods of 20+% year returns, you're not overly exposed to all the stuff that got you here. Meaning, let's say you have a ton of money in technology stocks, the Mag 7, and you've had a good experience over the last 24 months. That's probably the case, right? But nothing lasts forever. Now, it doesn't mean that the market has to go down, but there may be other opportunities, other pockets of the market that'll offer you other returns. Other sectors, right? Financials have done really well. Things like industrials have done pretty well. You can look at materials. You can look at healthcare. There are a lot of other opportunities in the market. Gold has done really well. So making sure that you're diversified and that when you look at your portfolio, it's probably not all working every day, all the time. The part of your portfolio that's driving you nuts because it's boring, you still have to have it.
One of the things I hear you say on a regular basis, my favorite, is like something along the lines of like, if all of your portfolio is up at the same time, like you're doing it wrong because I mean, then you're not diversified. But I'm like, man, that's a simple way to explain it.
It's not all supposed to do the same thing every day. Yeah.
Talking about the investment strategy side of things, and you mentioned mentors before. Like, do you have role models when it comes to the investment side of the house?
Yes. And I'm going to stop short of naming individual people, but the role models, and I sort of alluded to this before, the people who stick to their knitting. I'll name Warren Buffett. I mean, who doesn't have Warren Buffett as a role model? That guy sticks to his knitting like nobody you've ever seen. He has his principles. He has invested like that for his entire career. He refuses to budge on it. And you know what? I think he's done okay. People have questioned him over the years. There are times, and right now he's got more cash than he's ever had before. So people will question him. Is this sending a message, or did he miss it? Did he lose his edge, right? It's every few years or so you get this question of, oh my gosh, did Warren Buffett lose his edge? No, he didn't lose his edge. He just didn't change his mind. He just didn't change the way that he does it. And I respect that immensely. It's that patience. And he has a quote, I might get it wrong a little bit here, but something along the lines of, the market is a mechanism designed to transfer money from the impatient to the patient. And I think that is so powerful to think of it that way. So it's people like him that stick to their process. It's also people who are true to basically their form of investing. So if you're a growth investor, stay a growth investor, right? And true to their identity of it. There are people in this industry who say things very outrageously, sometimes seemingly just to make a splash. And I don't admire that. I think it's important to stay level-headed about it. And even when it goes against the grain. And that's just maybe some of my predisposition of, I probably have a predisposition to be a little bit more of a value investor, where I want to find the under-discovered, or I want to find the thing that's on sale and stick to it long enough that it pays off, rather than find the splashy thing that's going to make a good headline.
How do you balance that, though? Like, communicating, on a regular basis, especially like social media, on TV, where maybe splash would, be compelling. It would be easier.
Sure.
How do you balance that with your overall philosophy?
Splash is great for ratings. You do have to talk about the splashy stuff, and it requires you to understand it and know, right? I still have to talk about crypto. I still have to talk about the Mag 7 stocks. I still have to talk about the big headlines. But I think that there is a responsibility to not get too wrapped up in the emotions of all of it. And sometimes the splash is just that. It's emotional.
Yeah.
And it can be very short-lived. So I try to think about, like, am I going to regret saying this in 2 weeks? If there's a high chance that I'm going to regret saying this in 2 weeks, I'm not going to say it. If I think that there's a chance I regret it in a year, I'm a little more comfortable with that, honestly, because that means that I can probably stick to this. The thesis is strong enough in my head that I can stick to this for a year. Maybe it's 6 months, whatever it is. But if I get too caught up in the short-terminess of it, that's how I know it's probably not worth making a splash with.
The timeline's interesting, by the way. It's not forever, but it's long enough right in that middle area. Okay, so speaking about, kind of like communicating investment ideas, to the masses, how did you learn how to take like a super complex idea, which to most people is investing, and make it succinct, understandable, and relatable?
I think you have to learn how to say less. And I talk about the power of 3 a lot, and I think about the power of 3. The human brain hears 1, 2, 3, many. So once you've made a list, if you're trying to get some kind of concept across, and you've got 5 bullet points, you're trying to get that across verbally, it's too many. You've lost people you've at least lost them at 3.
Yeah.
You maybe even lost them at 2. So say less and figure out what is the really important part, no pun intended, what is the really important part of this point to get across. I think where people end up getting caught up in themselves is they want to say everything that they know about a particular topic, because they think it's important to know everything that they've figured out on their own or that they've done research on. You do not have to tell people everything. You just have to get across the main points. So saying less, I think, is a big part of that. I use a lot of analogies. I use a lot of metaphors. I think you do have to bring it back to regular everyday life. And you have to give people a different way to think about it. You did this just in the tax podcast. What was it? The harvest versus the seed.
Oh, the seed, yeah,
right?
seed versus harvest, yeah.
Yeah, thinking about an IRA versus a Roth. And I think that was perfect, right?
Yeah.
People understand that. It's a way to grasp it if you're not in this industry. One of the examples I've used before is if you're going to invest in something, put enough money in it. If you have conviction in it, put enough money in it that it'll actually make a difference in your portfolio.
Yeah.
You don't buy a Porsche to drive it 5 under the speed limit, right? If you're going to buy a Porsche, you're going to drive it a little faster. So if you have conviction in a certain investment, put enough money in there that it'll actually make a difference if you're right.
Yeah.
And it'll hurt if you're wrong, but you know what? You're going to learn faster. So it's some of those metaphors that you have to really grasp people with.
And now, does that differ depending on because you speak to different audiences, whether it be our end members, whether it be internal communities, whether it be external people who are, quite frankly, investment experts. Like, how do you tailor your message to those audiences?
Yeah, you do have to tailor it. You do have to change. You have to change the language that you use. One of the biggest challenges, honestly, is different sizes of audiences. So giving a presentation on a stage in front of 200 people is very different from a meeting room full of 10 people. And you do have to tailor the message. You have to tailor your energy level. You have to tailor the words that you're using, but just the message itself too. So, and that, honestly, I wish there was some kind of secret sauce. You just learn by doing. You learn by screwing it up. Trying to deliver a message, having it not land at all, and then doing the post-mortem yourself afterwards, like, what did I do wrong here? And needing to put those changes in place next time.
You mean I'm not the only one that like gave a presentation? And you have this where you get done and you're like, oh man, that was bad. Like that in your,
Oh, yeah. Well, or you have an audience member. This has happened to me. You have an audience member come up and tell you it was bad.
Oh, okay.
Not only do you think it was bad, but you get done and you have somebody come up from the audience and say that that didn't work.
Yeah.
Like, well, thank you. I was already
You have a great day too.
pretty bad about myself, but you just really
Oh my gosh.
stuck the knife in and twisted it. So, but you know what? You learn and you have experiences like that. Like I did, and that I'm thinking of one in particular, and you promise yourself, I will never let that happen again.
I love that, to hear about how you're talking about reaching different people. And I think not only with your story, but then people can take that away in their own career as well. Thank you very much for letting me come interview you. It was a blast because I get to read and, you're, again, one of my favorite Twitter people to follow, keep up my news. So thank you so much.
Well, thanks for letting me be on this side of the mic.
I know.
Yeah, what a great experience. For more from me, read my weekly column every Thursday on the SoFi blog or follow me on X at Liz Thomas Strat. Follow The Important Part wherever you get your podcasts. The Important Part is produced by SoFi in partnership with Pod People.
The views expressed do not necessarily reflect the institutional views of SoFi or its affiliates. This program should not be copied, distributed, published, or reproduced in whole or in part or disclosed by any recipient to any other person without the express written consent of SoFi. Each name of any organization mentioned in this program is the property of the company to which it relates, is used here strictly for informational and identification purposes only, and is not used to imply any authority, ownership, or license rights between any such company and SoFi. The content of this program is not a recommendation from SoFi to you or any listener or recipient of this program, and is provided for informational purposes only. SoFi is not providing any financial, economic, legal, investment, accounting, or tax advice through this program, or to its recipient, and you and any person should not rely on this program for any advice. Investment decisions should be based on specific financial needs, goals, and risk appetite. SoFi has no obligation to provide updates or changes to the information in this program. Past performance of any investments mentioned does not guarantee future results, which may vary. Neither SoFi nor any of its affiliates makes any representation or warranty, express or implied, as to the accuracy or completeness of the statements or any information contained in this program. Any liability for any statements in this program is expressly disclaimed by SoFi. For additional disclosures related to the SoFi Invest platforms described above, please visit sofi.com/legal.